Hey, we're just getting, thanks for patience here. We're just getting some mic issues worked out with Jessica. And can everybody else hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Thanks for everybody who is joining us live today. My name is Deborah Sampier. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Althea, and we're joined today with Jessica Engel, who's also part of the Althea team, has an amazing story of broadband outreach and connectivity. LaShawn Williamson, who amazing broadband champion for communities in North Carolina, and Ben, oh gosh, Ben, how do you pronounce your last name?
Matranga.
From Connectivity Capital, who's an awesome advocate for building broadband networks and funding them. And I'm really proud to be in this group here of folks that are not only advocates but have built networks, have had experience building networks, getting them funded, and really building them from the ground up. And so that's what's really exciting for me today. And Jessica, if you've got mic control, I'll hand this over to you. Oh, we're still not hearing you there.
All right, there.
Oh.
Moment. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Sorry for having some microphone troubles. It's typical for technology, and we all know the pains of that. And connectivity, sometimes goes all the way inside the house to every single device on your network. So we understand that pain more than most, and so I appreciate everybody joining. I appreciate the huge amount of viewers that have joined and registered. It shows that this topic is really valuable to everybody, and I'm super excited to be able to moderate this panel today. So we have some really good stuff for you, and so I'll start with a simple icebreaker question to kind of get everybody's voice moving a little bit. And so first, we're going to start with the managing partner of Connectivity Capital. We have Ben. So Ben, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and then I have a little icebreaker question for you when you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Great to be here today. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We love talking about this stuff. This is, we like to say this is the water we swim in. So whenever we can be around the table with other folks excited about it, it's a great pleasure. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Ben Matranga. I'm the managing partner at Connectivity Capital. My co-founder, Jim Forster, and I established the firm after a pretty organic journey. My background is in finance. Our firm focuses exclusively on emerging markets, but we really were, about how do we bring the internet to more people? The internet's been going for decades. We're both based in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and the internet has transformed our lives. And as we melded that experience with some of the investments we had done in emerging markets, we saw that these networks could be built, they could be financed, and there was a real commercial case for that. So for over 17 years, I've been investing in emerging markets, mostly based in Africa, a bit of time in Asia and Latin America as well. And our firm, we manage a portfolio of investments. We have partnerships with the United States government, everything from USAID to the Department of State. And we make direct investments in WISPs, in every bit of digital infrastructure you can think of. Right now, we've got over 12 investments, and I think we're covering about 16 different countries in Southern Africa, India, and the Philippines.
Awesome, Ben. Thank you. So the icebreaker question is, how does prioritizing digital equity affect the economy of a community?
It changes it. We live in a bifurcated world, right? Like in essence, it's already here. And I think, COVID just showed it. But there is essentially those who have access to the world's knowledge, to, kind of the ability to get real-time information to solve any problem one might have, and those who don't. And it's pretty stark. For the environments that we invest in, broadband penetration is less than 1%. Internet access tends to be in the 30s across the continent of sub-Saharan Africa. Obviously, there's a lot of different pockets, whether you're in urban, peri-urban, rural. The word we like to use a lot is agency. Like, we think, and it really does, when we talk about locally owned infrastructure, it's agency over your life. And that's like big things and small. I think we love to talk about like the use cases of, e-health, certainly online learning, searching for a job, buying a used car. Like, it's just so ubiquitous in our lives. We forget that if you're offline, all of those activities are just shut out. There's also kind of just the basic stuff, right? Calling your mom on her birthday, all of the things that give you tremendous value. And, at the end of the day, you kind of like want to zone out and watch some TV. There's even those parts of it that are incredibly important. So for us, it's about giving people those resources to choose whatever they want to do online.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. Is there any questions for Ben? Let's take a look at the
wanted to just say that I have been a big fan of Connectivity Capital's work, and that they've, emerging markets can be a really challenging, area to fund effectively. And there's been a lot of attempts that haven't worked out well. But I think that your approach to a very practical, and focusing kind of on the cost and structure of that funding is been something that I've admired over the years and have been following your work. So mad props.
Thank you. Deb, I got to say, every time I've seen you on a panel, I am scribbling to write down notes because you're mentioning 2 or 3 things that I feel like, oh, I didn't know that. So we certainly have been following what you guys are doing and appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the exciting thing about this opportunity is that, like, I personally have never met you, Ben, and I know that, I just recently met LaShawn, and what I really love about, growing the network of networks is that that's in people too. It's not just building internet connectivity. It's about connecting with other people in this world, in this space, and that learning from them, just having a conversation with LaShawn about, getting folks rolled in ACP. I've learned things and it's really exciting. And so moving that on to LaShawn, LaShawn Williams, she's a Wave 7 Communications in North Carolina. She's also, part of the Althea family. So her network is one that is powered by love from Althea. So I'll hand this over to LaShawn to introduce herself, say a little bit about her company, and then I got an icebreaker for you.
Awesome. Can you hear me okay? Well, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share today. And we love the love from Althea. I think if we didn't have that love, we would have been gone a long time ago. And just a little bit about our company. We started in February of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And it was basically out of our own frustration of just not getting what we needed from the big names, right? And we just started Googling and YouTubing, how do you start an internet company, believe it or not? And if you go out there, you can find that information. And so thankfully, we were connected with Deborah, with Althea, and we've hit the ground running. We are only in a small town right now called Enfield, North Carolina, which happens to be my husband's hometown. It's a rural community, a tier 1 county, and they were in desperate need of reliable, affordable internet. And we knew that, with the coaxing of Deborah, that we should focus our attention on that rural community. And we're so glad we did, because the town has partnered with us and we've been able to do some tremendous things. So really excited about that.
Thanks, LaShawn. So the icebreaker real quick is that you answered part of my question already, but without having, a crystal ball at the beginning, how do you feel like focusing on connecting the community around you and intending to create a social impact made a difference in your original business plan?
Well, our business plan is always including finding a people to help people find solutions to their problems, no matter what it was, And in this particular vein, we've been able to come in and see a revival, if you will, of hope, of energy. The community, the neighbors, they are embracing the fact that they can have internet a different way. We have some people now who, because of the pandemic, were not able to work from home because they did not have reliable internet. And since then, we've had some of our customers to take, to take advantages of on at home online business opportunities. And so it's good for the economy. It's good for just the self-esteem of a people who have been, for whatever reason, their home is in a place where there's so much poverty. And so there's life coming out of that. And, what greater feeling can you have to help people find solutions to their problems and change the trajectory of a community?
I want to just say I had the greatest privilege to be able to actually meet some of the folks in Enfield and see what y'all were building. And what I loved about it is y'all were building with the community.
Yeah.
What's so exciting about kind of the approaches that we're talking about today is, like you're saying, it's that self-esteem, it's that resiliency and sustainability building together. Y'all had, churches and the, municipality and the library, and that community was coming together to build something together that was, part of that community now. So huge and a lot of respect. And it's a lot of showing up and putting in the work. And I can be thankless some days.
We're too far in to turn back now.
But it is. It's about like just like I was saying, the forming those community connections. That's what keeps us going. We're doing this together. You're not on your own.
Yeah. Definitely the digital stewards that we have because of some grants, and I know we'll talk about that going forward further, but that has tremendously helped and taken the ownership. When we say we are locally operated, there are people who are in the community who are calling our team by first name. Oh, is Terry coming by? And they know everybody. It's just different. It's a different way of delivering something everyone should have means to. So yeah.
That's beautiful. And I got to hear a little bit of that yesterday with a assistant with ACP application. I'm all the way over in Northern California, and LaShawn is, calling one of her community members to get them enrolled. And I'm just on the phone standby helping. But it's so cool to hear that community. You can hear it in the way that the conversation goes. There's still that level of high level customer service, but there's something underlying that you can feel, because it's not just somebody, that you don't know their face, you don't know their, where they live, or, you've never seen them in person. There's a friendlier sort of community that's created, and just the simple things like that. So it's beautiful. Love it. All right. So we're going to go back to a question from the audience. This is from YouTube for Ben. So I have it showing here on the screen, Ben. I'm going to focus the camera on you. And so the question is, are you currently financing any projects, in LATAM or Latin America? There's a huge opportunity for people to have access to large projects, but we simply can't finance them.
The direct answer is yes. So we've got one project right now we're financing in Ecuador. We're, the door's always open. We're excited to talk to anyone. We do, it's a story we hear from most countries around the world. You hear this, basically folks, they, are delay or forego or put off expansion plans because they can't access financing. And it's a little, we just came out with this report alongside ACP Connect Humanity and the Internet Society. And it was about financial mechanisms and all the different financial resources. And the reason, that kind of brought us to the table with this is we saw people struggling. They would go to their local bank. All of these mechanisms were different. And the mechanisms change by market, right? So some local banks work. One of the things I love is when we talk to a lot of WISPs here in the United States, is how many of them got started with an SBA-backed loan. This is the Small Business Administration. And they're, so the options for a WISP in the United States are slightly different than those in emerging markets. So to answer your question directly, Michael, yes, absolutely. Reach out. Feel free to send us a message through our website. And we'll jump right in. One of the things we like to say as a sector-specific investor is we can get to brass tacks pretty fast about like how you're building your network, what works. And if we can't help, we've got like a network of other people we're always happy to connect you with and resources to see you succeed.
I've put a banner on the front of the video with a link to the report. You can find it on Connect Humanity's website under report. It's called Financing CCPs. So CCP is a new term, right? Community Connectivity Provider, right? Did I get it right? And
correct. Yeah.
The new way of saying community networks. Like that's what we've been doing for a while, but to normalize the folks that are municipals, that are local owners, that are cooperatives, that are small businesses or just projects to get connectivity to a community, and which leads us perfectly over to Deborah. So Deborah's a prime example of this. And so I'll bring the question over to you about community connectivity providers and a little bit about Althea.
So I think, probably a lot of folks know me, but I'm the CEO and co-founder of Althea, and Althea is really all about these, what really normalizes community connectivity providers, but it's essentially about providing tools and modularity to the way that we build networks and, changing the way we think about ownership of networks too. Instead of having one company that has to own all of the hardware, the fiber, the radios, and do all of the service layers, Althea really empowers people to build open access networks in a multi-entity way. So different people can own pieces of the network. They can own the fiber, they can own the radios for LTE wireless, and then another provider can actually provide the service layer to that. So that really enables communities to have what we call broadband Legos, right? To build networks that work for the community, and also empower them to keep that, those benefits local, and structure that and govern those networks in different ways. So we've been doing this since early 2018, have networks in 7 states in the US, and have built in Africa. We have a network in Ghana currently, and also in LATAM, and are working in Puerto Rico currently. So excited to be here, and encourage folks to think kind of outside of the monopolistic box that telcos have normally been built in, into new ways that we can, form new types of investment into networks, new types of ownership, and how we can kind of bring that balance of power back to the people, and build networks that are more capital efficient and bring broadband to more people as well.
All right. So your question is, social impact funding was the topic of choice. What is it, and why should we care?
So I love the word impact in that word there, because normally when we think about traditional sources of funding, there sometimes will be about the types of infrastructure, like building fiber optic or building LTE networks, or they'll be about the business plan. But the impact funding really shifts the focus to what is the outcome of that network going to be. What are the digital equity? What is the access? And so this really gives communities and people wishing to start small businesses or cooperatives different ways to seek funding to focus on that impact, right? And then you can really build things in flexible ways as well. I was talking with somebody about this idea of a grant fit or a funding fit, right? So it's certainly about the resources and capital needed to build networks, but there's not always it's not always one size fits all. And maybe a federal grant's going to be right for you. Maybe it's going to be private equity, maybe it's going to be this kind of social impact funding that really focuses on the impact piece of that.
Okay, so we have a few questions in the queue. This one is requirements to build a network from Althea.
So this probably requires a bit of a context. So the question is, requires for a network to be built with the Althea tech to receive the ACP funding. And I'm going to take a step back and just let everybody know, so we're on the same page. What does these ACP funding mean? So ACP is Affordable Connectivity Program. It's program, right? And what that is it's a subsidy or money from the government to the ISP to provide a credit to the household needing a break on their connectivity costs. So that flow of money is an internet service provider who is providing connectivity in that area would get a credit, typically $30 for non-tribal households, and I think $75 for tribal, to provide internet access. And so when we think about that in the context of an Althea network, which is very modular, right? Lots of little Legos. The infrastructure piece can be separate than the kind of service and digital equity layer. So in order for an infrastructure network built with Althea, it just needs to sort of connect into our larger VPN network or exit network and connect into the larger technology. Then they would be applicable to be part of that credit system. And so that's something we would work together with a local provider on, and they can reach out on althea.net. There's a great little easy form to fill out, and we work with you on how to kind of get folks through that process.
So just to let everyone know, I think that, with Althea powered networks, part of that is that you get to use ACP program just by having the love power your network. So automatically, LaShawn's Wave 7 gets to offer ACP to the community that she's serving, and she, as the business, goes out into the community, and she can advertise ACP, she can do enrollments and all of those things. And then we kind of take on the administrative lift of the challenge that is ACP. I keep hearing things about like turnkey ACP is a term that lots of people want to use. It's really a heavy lift for providers, and especially those that are new to a subsidy type of program. So Althea powered is that ACP comes with the love. All right, so going back to some of the questions in the audience here, we have. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to make one point about impact investing and social impact finance, and our goal when we started Connectivity Capital, we were kind of like audacious, and we said we want to build a category within impact investing. And what impact investing specifically is kind of what we describe as double bottom line investing. So folks of investors that are looking for some financial return, but also a measurable impact outcome as well. And all of our investment agreements, et cetera, have all of that clearly laid out. Every incentive structure needs to be aligned in that. And one of the concepts we get in the report that I think is critical is blended finance. And it's this concept of, if you want to have high impact in areas and the commercial case isn't 100% there, you can use portions of subsidized money, mix it with private money or philanthropic money to achieve the outcome. Now, the key here is that risk exists on a spectrum, impact exists on a spectrum, the cost to own and operate and build a network exists on a spectrum. Whether you're going deep rural, whether you're peri-urban, what's your cost of backhaul, kind of all of the myriad of different setting factors when you go to start a network. And I think what's so critical is, once you can take all of those pieces together, it's letting people know that there are resources they could go to. to be able to access that capital and build their network. In the United States right now, we're in a great time where there's been more funding and focus on broadband. Now that money is difficult to access. It comes with a lot of requirements. I know that the Althea system makes those requirements a little bit easier, but I think it is kind of time for action if you are on the ground and want to build a network, access network, that those resources may not be around in another half decade. Our goal is that they won't be needed another half decade because everyone will be online. So I think, that's this concept of that resources out there, finding the alignment and going out and getting it.
So Ben, if I were to summarize that, for impact investing to create a larger impact, you would take some, grants, some loans, some investment capital into your projects. Is that what you're meaning by impact investments?
Correct. Yeah. And one of the things we talk about is like unique stages of ISP development, right? So, some people talk about crawl, walk, run. We talk about starting, sustaining, et cetera. But it's, in each distinct phase of a business, it's a whole different set of challenges. One of the things we like to say is like, you break all of your systems every time you double your subscriber base. And it's just true. Like the way you do installs at 10 customers is not the way you could do it at 100. It's certainly not the way you could do it at 10,000. And part of the challenge, and every, Sean is like living it. Like it's just you have to just recreate it every time, and you keep the things that worked before, and hopefully you adopt new processes and systems that don't work before. The challenging thing about operating a network is there's just like 5 different, multiple different things going on, right? It's your backhaul, it's your install, it's the customer service piece, it's technology choice, et cetera. So it's there's all of those moving pieces, but you can certainly evolve over time. I think what's critical for folks to understand is that the capital that's available in early stages is different than mid stages, is different in late stages. And there's a lot of trade-offs that you make. And one of the things we tried to do with the report is just explain what those trade-offs are. Empower people with the information to say, here's what I can choose, here's where my community's at, therefore I'm going to make these set of decisions. We find by and large in emerging markets where we cover, there is not government subsidy. There is what we call development finance institutions, DFIs, that subsidize it, but it's a different form of subsidy that has to take on, but there is still some subsidy there.
Yeah, that's a good point. You basically are building a plane while it's in motion, building out a community network, and it's okay because you have that connection to the community that you adjust and change as needed. And so this question from the audience is a good one. I'm going to throw it to LaShawn first. What's the best way to raise awareness of the lack of connectivity to broadband? So there's portions of this question that I imagine are directed towards like in a larger scale, but there's the first place you have to start, and that's with the community. So LaShawn, did you want to take a swing at that? Talking about what your community there in Infield has done, or what you've done with your community?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? I don't see myself.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
You can see me? Okay. So, when we started out, the very first thing was finding the temperature. What's the need of the community? And so we actually went out and did surveys, and through that made some connections that helped us reach a larger audience. So going to churches, the municipality that's in place, those are all ways for you to get in front of the people who you're trying to serve. And that was really critical for us in the beginning. And then as we started to onboard customers, then it's that word of mouth in the neighborhood, because we're building a community network that is neighbor helping neighbor. So it's a lot of grassroots kind of work that we had to do, and we are still doing. And we did maximize the use of radio, because a lot of people didn't have access to internet. So most people can turn on their radios. So we had to do some marketing like that, and that was effective for us as well. So I hope I've addressed how to raise awareness.
Okay, so then thinking about it on a larger scale, a more looking at it from a global perspective, Deborah, do you want to talk a little bit about how to bring awareness to like potentially an urban bubble that's not being made visible?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the urban one because it's quite large and it's an intersectional issue, which is quite interesting. The Portland, Oregon did a report a couple years ago, and it was like 13% of all the urban population had no access to home broadband, and this was despite having more than 2 wired connections. And I think New York City is pretty similar. They were right around, I think, 17 or 18%, so a little bit higher. That's a pretty significant amount that have no home broadband. But what I thought was interesting about the report in Portland, Oregon, is if you look at the Hispanic demographic, then it raises to 30% have no access to internet. And I think this is important to realize because the issue is nuanced. It isn't, of course, certainly cost is a big piece of it, but there are, language barriers. There might be debt. There might be, difficulty with documentation and doing the process, and there's all of these we talked a little bit about how the Affordable Connectivity Program and doing that outreach is so important, but I think it's important to talk with municipal leaders about some of the nuanced challenges. And your best helpers here are folks like the digital equity stewards that are in place in the library systems, that are in your school districts, that are already doing this outreach work, that are already very viscerally aware of the problem. Those are your advocates to help really build better, sustainable, true access systems. And basically that's about meeting people where they're at. And this is why we built Althea's Always On free tier that provides a no cost, like for example, we're doing 50 megabits per second of always on no cost internet for everybody. And then there's a prepaid system for people to add additional funds. So this builds kind of that sustainability in the model while still meeting people where they're at with their needs that they're at now.
So the next question is for you as well.
Yeah. So this question talks about Key LTE, which is our embedded EPC or the core part of LTE networks in the home router. Because we said, hey, a lot of Althea's thesis is not only do we need to build networks to give people access. Starlink does things that are great about giving people access, but it really doesn't do anything for democratizing ownership of networks or creating sustainable systems or any of those other pieces that are really important. So what we did with Key LTE is say, look, we maybe want to build more community-focused LTE networks. Maybe you need smart agriculture. Maybe you want to do private LTE. Maybe you want smart cities work, whatever it is. Really, and the two problems to building LTE networks are it's difficult to understand and it's expensive. So the first thing we sort of set about doing is fixing both of those problems. So the EPC or the core part of the LTE network just is embedded in that home router. And it's plug and play to connect an ENB, which is an LTE type of radio, and then build a private LTE and eventually 5G network. And that really helps not only provide better access, but we're also democratizing the ability for people to build using these, like this is a whole new Lego set there in your in the repertoire of the broadband Legos that people can use to build networks. And it's affordable and easy to use. And our team is here to, also support people in building those in new and interesting ways. So not only are you providing more broadband access, maybe also that farmer can, do smart and precision ag, that small municipality can do cameras, you can do wildfire cameras, like the whole repertoire of the interesting things that you can do with a fully LTE compliant network. Sorry, that was big.
Yeah, there's some.
So hopefully we kind of hit some of that without getting too nerdy into the tax. So we do also, for folks that are interested, there is some LTE deep dive videos on the YouTube channel where we talk a little bit more about how that fits into a community network.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good questions in the audience and in the questions that came in advance. So let's go to the next question. That is, I'll throw this out to Ben and Deborah both. What are your ideas on how to address and scale once you're there to developing countries where policy is not robust in terms of democracy? This is a tough one.
Yeah, I think I think it goes down to that individual empowerment, right? For anyone to access their rights, to be able to petition their government, have access to information, et cetera. It's kind of, the digital means are like your ability to get on the field, right? And I think it's almost a precursor to that. In general, I mean, as folks that finance and work with builders of networks, we kind of operate in the systems that exist, right? They're imperfect. And like, we're often frustrated, but like, you still got to just do it. Like, and you know what I mean? So you're in governments that, regulators make it difficult or arbitrarily enforcing rules because an incumbent mobile network operator is telling them to do something. There's kind of all of that jazz, and you kind of got to just keep going. And I think that's what's so critical in how these community networks get built. I think one of the big things that I think is important for everyone to understand in terms of awareness, et cetera, is like, there's an opportunity to go on offense, right? Like all what it takes to build a network. It can be, it's not easy, but it is relatively simple. And I think there is a lot of products out there. There's certainly resources out there, but you can get those things together and be able to, get up and running. And I think that's the key, is just to get up and running as fast as you can. Because once that network's on, it awakens that latent demand. I don't think anyone that gets, a 50 Mbps connection, 100 Mbps, it's different in the emerging markets. But once you get that connection and you're online and people are using it, they're not going back, because the value that they derive in their own life from being online. And that's what we strive for. Get people online as fast as possible, regardless of technology. And we do everything from fiber, fixed wireless access, some LTE, like just get online as fast as possible. And once a customer is online, they will be your biggest advocate. They will petition government. They will petition, they'll tell their neighbors, like that begins the kind of virtuous cycle that gets going.
That's a really good point. But the question that I put on the screen here is kind of the point of this particular webinar, right? These community connectivity providers have been bootstrapping this on their own dollar for a very long time. And so they kind of limit to what they can muster up from building out a network. And sometimes it's really hard and stressful. And so, the question I'm going to throw to Deb first, but generally what we're trying to answer today is what has changed. Because these build outs are expensive. And what we do with the wireless right now, there's a lot of negative feedback from different states that are saying fiber first, but fiber takes a long time. What if we throw out wireless and then build upon that? So, Deb, I want to throw that over to you first and address that a little bit.
Yeah, and I hope that you can forgive me a little bit. I'm going to go back to that other question because I do want to add a couple of things to that. In emerging markets or in any community, there's often different, kind of sets of leaders that can also sort of take on that challenge, whether that be religious leaders or community centers. That often can be a way to, kind of create that political will to build a coordinated effort. The other thing that I would say is sometimes you can focus on some economic development on the private network side. Like I said earlier about smart agriculture, you could certainly start a broadband type network by moving forward with, building a private LTE network that supports smart ag or, connects a warehouse or a business, which often is another kind of center of political will. And let's say you have a mine or you have an anchor customer or something like that needs to get fiber. That's something that you could leverage then to grow that network out. So sometimes the government in that area isn't the only kind of the entity that has agency to get something done. So encourage communities to look at where else there might be, ability to move forward and produce results that then can grow. Okay, then to go back to the actual the question there. Thanks everybody. So things have changed since 2020 when COVID hit, and the reality of the necessary the need for broader internet connectivity, very similar to how we electrified the country, back in the 1950s, and that mandate was possible. What we're seeing across globally is the understanding of the impact that connectivity makes. I think it was in 2019, 2020 when we also started having studies coming out of Tennessee that were saying, look, we get $6 back for every dollar we put into broadband. And I think it made it very clear that these things were necessary. And then I think another thing also started to happen where we saw that previous ways of investing weren't always the right fit for rural communities or urban communities that were struggling. And so there's been, this is why Althea was formed, right? Because we had a community here that I live in Oregon where they had $1 million of funding for 1,500 people, and it didn't do anything. It didn't make any kind of meaningful impact because it wasn't really built in a sustainable way. So I think what we're starting to realize, and where there is more opening of funding, is that building things the way we used to doesn't always work, and that we need to build things together with the community in a sustainable way.
All right, Ben, did you want to add anything about that from the report that you all have done?
Yeah, I would just say, there's every community has its unique set of factors. And, what we did in the report is highlight 10 different case studies of successful community networks that are kind of later cycles. So they've achieved scale. And while there is differences in each of those communities, there is some commonalities. And I would say the two big commonalities are, the first one is this idea of, the project champion, an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, and that could take various forms. That could take a government employee that is the head of the Department of Technology that is just, understands the idea, understands the economics, and works with the city council to bring the community forward. In that example, that was Ammon, Idaho. And what Bruce Patterson did, over a multi-year journey to work with his city to understand, to de-risk, and to get comfortable with the idea of the city building the infrastructure side and then layering it on with the service layer to actually deliver the internet. In a different case, for example, in Barn in the English countryside, they took an approach where they started connecting directly, and that was local community advocates. They combined skill sets, so they had some folks that were amazing at the technical side, some folks that were amazing at the community kind of formation, and had been longtime community actors who brought people together. They leveraged that skill set, and then eventually they just started. They got hundreds of people online, and then essentially they got an early grant. Then they convinced the government to launch a program that was the voucher scheme that enabled them to now reach over 100,000 users. But in each of those cases, they had a clear project champion. They just started connecting people. And I would say the third factor is almost this sense of frugality, right? Like, you can't copy the model of the incumbent because you just don't have the choice, because they have vastly more resources. And how you get around it is by solving the specific problem in front of you. And it's just one connection, point A to point B, using off-the-shelf equipment. In a lot of ways, you're not making the perfect network. You're making the network that gets a high-quality service to the user now. And that's a hard thing for a lot of entrepreneurs. You want the perfect thing now. And in some cases, it does make sense to go in and build that fiber. But in other cases, it's not practical. Our hope is that people have the information to make that clarity of choice and can then think through the analytics behind it, right? So what's the cost benefit to building fiber? What's the ROI, et cetera? I think it's a mistake to kind of broadly apply that to every community that have different density levels and different needs. And just, I mean, the economics are so different in every community that kind of that one size fits all isn't going to work. I think having broad parameters around quality of service is critical, but that quality of service is going to differ. Even in emerging markets, we're not talking 25/3 in terms of what broadband is. Service packages are less than that.
I know that from experience. I think one of the offerings that I had was 1 megabit for a standard connection or 5 for a premium. So I wanted to just touch on one thing that you had mentioned, and that I thought was kind of funny in the difference between what was going on in the UK with the voucher scheme and what we're doing with ACP. It's a very similar program, but the fact that they call it a scheme is interesting, right? Because there's constantly this talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's this program, at least in the US for the Affordable Connectivity Program, is not benefiting the provider in any way, shape, or form. It's a pass-through directly to the customer. So I'm curious if there's any thoughts on the alignment with the UK calling it a scheme.
I want to be careful. I mean, I'm sure members of your audience can run circles around me and talking about U.S. government challenges and how it actually works, because it's not what we cover day in and day out. So I'd love to audience feedback questions on that front, on because I'm sure there's just a ton of ways the program could be better, could achieve its objective of more people online. I would say in the UK they advocated directly with the government. Mm-hmm. They saw the need for many years and they said, we are doing it. Like they could get convening authority with members of their government because they had done something, and they could say, this is what we're doing, and we could do a heck of a lot more if we have this de-risking factor. And here's our economics. Here's what it costs us. Here's to show you that we're not making a ton of money. Like that subsidy is going to go to this specific thing, and it's going to cost $2,500. The subsidy is only for $1,500, but we believe there's a payback period of this. You're walking, elected officials through that subsidy model. I think that's empowering because it's based on fact. And then, a lot of governments aren't, they're not kind of hoping for it. They can actually base it on fact. And in almost all these cases that we covered, there was a clear pattern of that clear walk run.
No, I like the fact that you mentioned that, because it's exactly what the case study in the UK showed, was how to get the government to see that the rules and the things that they're putting in place are just assumptions that are being made about a program are maybe not the case, and that you could show them. And I think that that's what actually happened with tribes specifically moving into the telecom space, is that a couple of the original tribal telecoms actually had to go to the FCC, open up their books, and actually show them to prove that it was not, some sort of scheme to get additional funding. So it's a really good use case to kind of show that history. So thanks for that.
The one other thing I would say that I think is critical is, like, in a lot of these case studies, it took, a half a decade in some cases. Like I know when folks are in the throes of it, it feels like it's tough. But a lot of, building a network it's calisthenics. It's every day getting out there, hooking up 10 customers and just doing it over and over and over again. And if you look at the history of the cable industry in the United States, it's the same way it grew. So, when we talk to our companies in emerging markets, it's, get those processes and systems down for the things that matter and just do it every day and be out there telling the story. You have to have a degree of transparency. One of the challenging things about incumbents is they're not transparent whatsoever. And about what their economics are, total cost to build, et cetera. And I think it is something that community connectivity providers, when they provide that transparency, it actually shows, oh no, we can deliver better quality service at a fraction of the price that's achieving the outcome that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that leads perfectly to the question for LaShawn. How have you been able to fund your initial network build, and what are you doing to expand? What are the things that you've tried? What are some of the lessons that you've learned through this process?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Well, of course, we had to start out with our own pockets, and our own pockets could take us only so far. And thankfully, we were introduced to ISOC, and we applied for a grant, the Truist Epic Grant. And we were awarded that grant, and that tremendously helped us build out. We were about like 20 some subscribers on our own efforts, and now we're at 70 plus. We have recently been awarded a second grant. Now, what are the things that have helped us qualify for the grants is our relationship with a nonprofit organization that seemed to make us more attractive, and definitely falls into that social impact arena. And so our focus has been definitely to impact communities with this one particular grant that we got. With the Truist Epic Grant, expanding potential in communities was the epic part of that. We were able to implement a digital literacy course that I created for senior citizens, and we were also able to provide equipment to help people who were in need, and then also provide free internet for a year for several of the people who qualified for our scholarship. So we had an outreach program. And so, we're like at the end of that grant, and then now we've qualified for another grant with Connect Humanity. And we're excited that we've just received that award. And that was because of our partnership again with the nonprofit, and it's called the Wave of Hope Project. And so in that project, it's not just about connectivity, but it's also about workforce development. And so that social impact aspect of it is working again. We have applied for several federally funded grants, and have not been awarded those. And it goes back to, I guess, that opinion that fixed wireless is not as good as fiber and all of that. But we've got to work through those things. And I'm not discouraged by it. It actually fuels me to prove that they're wrong. And I think that, that voice of the community coming together to be your champions about the success of your network will help us really cross those boundaries and get the word out there more that, we're credible, we're delivering what we promise. And yeah, so many lessons learned, still learning a lot of lessons. But, we are just determined, as I said before, we're too far in to turn back. And we don't want to turn back because we see the impact that we are making in the lives of so many people and so many more. We have neighboring towns now who are reaching out and saying, please come to our town with Wave 7. So the word is spreading. Our name is going to be out there. People are going to start running into, who do you have ACP with? Wave 7. Wave 7. They will continue to hear Wave 7. And so that's going to help. But I just want to encourage anyone who really has a commitment to help people have affordable, reliable internet. Definitely look at the model that I know this is not a plug for Althea necessarily thing, but broadband debt was one of the things that when we did our survey with that grassroots effort of just seeing what the temperature was like in the town, people are paying a whole lot of money for a little bit of internet that might work. And then when they can no longer pay for it, then it goes into them losing access to the little bit of internet they had. And so with this model of how we do things with Althea, that always on tier, that has really helped our customers. And it's amazing to see how people are willing, when something is working well, they don't want to go back just to the free tier. They like streaming their televisions. They like doing the gaming. How if you have kids, so they're like, what's going on? It's not going as fast, right? So it's always on, but it's not as fast until they load that money back to their routers. The ACP is definitely helping the families in the community with that as well. So it's just a win-win. But yeah.
I love that. Like, that's exactly what the vision was in creating, this model with Althea. And it's like having a name like that at the heart of it. It's like you have this special aunt, that's got you, and hearing the duplication of the vision, right? So the question for Deborah is, you found ways to make it work, right? With grant funding, partnering with community organizations, nonprofits, your neighbor, the guy down the street, somebody you meet at a park. Like, that's the way that it has been growing. And then you hear, LaShawn, it feels like you're making little babies of mini Deborahs everywhere you go.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. One thing I wanted to, LaShawn's story just resonates with me so much. And I did want to kind of put some context on that just to make it real for folks too. Most people who are in broadband debt, it's roughly $400 worth of debt. And I remember one of our first subscribers in the very beginning with Althea, her family had worked 2 jobs. And so she had to go to, school and do her homework after school. And, she's 16 and they were in broadband debt, a few $100s, and they just thought they were never going to get internet again. They could see no way around that. And because of that, because they had no internet at home, she was going to school, her parents worked 2 jobs. They never saw each other. So when we were able to come in and bring in that internet and have that, that always on tier, she was able to have dinner with her family again. It was like life transforming, that thing. But it's one of those things that these are folks all around us that maybe have access to the cables. We've built the infrastructure. That's not the problem. We just haven't built it in a way that people can access it. So, definitely resonate when talking with, LaShawn and that community there too. I think it's probably the same for communities all over the US. Okay, so to get back to the question at hand here, that's something we've been pretty successful with. And I think it kind of goes back to that original question about how do you work in a community in an emerging market where there might not be political will to move that project forward. There's oftentimes other entities with agency. And we often find that that's in the schools or in the religious organizations and nonprofits that are working directly with these communities. And in particular, the schools, we've in the beginning kind of moved forward with, they have a good understanding of where those communities are that need infrastructure or need a lower cost access. They're already sort of looking for a solution. And that partnership has been really, really great to be able to, build together. Also your libraries, there's folks out here that are already doing this digital equity work. And by supporting them, you just amplify that up. And that political will and agency starts to get more traction when we're connecting students, when we have internet at the libraries, and we're empowering those digital equity providers that are already working with the community that's doesn't have access right now. And that's what's been most successful for us.
I just wanted to add on to what Deborah said. One thing we often talk about is what we call the ABC model for cost-effective ISP growth. ABC stands for Anchor Business Consumer, and really, if you think about it, it's an ARPU ladder. And if you look at kind of how networks grow and are financially sustainable around the world, it's usually getting that first anchor customer. That's a local hospital, it's a local church, it's a library. But it really does change the economics of running and operating a network when you start on that higher end of the ARPU ladder and then can connect more folks.
You might want to, so just ARPU is ARPU.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to kind of give a little bit of that?
Yeah, ARPU stands for average revenue per user. And it is, typically that anchor customer is going to have a lot more users on their network. Think about, your local library with a couple dozen desks. the local school, et cetera. So the package that they will purchase is usually a higher tier, more bandwidth. You can have a lot more users on, et cetera. The nice thing that we've seen when folks start doing network design is you usually have time of day dynamics, right? Where your anchor institutions are usually during the day, high bandwidth time for most families is in the evening. So when you as you bring more of those anchor institutions online, it does give you what we call your kind of landed cost of bandwidth. Can be a lot cheaper to be able to work with those end users. So what we tell people is like, don't be shy about going to those big businesses. Like in a lot of cases, they're not satisfied either with their internet service provider. I think there is some risk aversion, so it's a serious thing that operators have to overcome. But when you get in someone's office and do a speed test, and they know how bad that service has been before, they will crank up a YouTube video and they're not coming back. Especially for those institutions.
I think that's a good point too. I mean, we take for granted that legacy providing internet is working, but in many cases, it's not working for them either. Like we look at mobile network operators in the U.S., their average cost to acquire that customer is $1,000, and then their ARPU is only around $38 per month. So they're taking years to pay folks back. So I think what's really exciting about this community network model sort of taking on is that this is actually more capital efficient. And oftentimes that anchor customer is also your first vertical asset, right? So that's if you're doing wireless, that's their tower cost right there. And by leveraging those relationships that you already have made. And that's kind of what the Althea model does too, is say, hey, if you've got a customer, that customer is also your broadcast space. There's no dead ends in these kinds of networks. And so I think that's what's exciting to me, is to see this model become more sticky. And I think we might even see legacy providers start to use pieces of this as it is more capital efficient.
That's a really good point, and one that I was completely unaware of. Having a network started by someone who's never been introduced to the community network model, and just coming from a legacy provider's point of view, there was every reason not to use someone's home as a relay. What if they don't pay their power bill? What if they move? What if they decide to change services? So what do you tell folks that have those reservations?
Love to hear LaShawn's perspective on that. I think when this is why you can't have just an infrastructure only network. You have to have a coordinating, body. There's that service layer. No, I love these models like Althea or Ammon's model, where you have a decoupled service and infrastructure layer, so you can use other types of alternative relay systems. But it is done usually with a coordinating entity. And then the other thing too is that you build networks in ways there's built-in redundancy. So you look at Althea, it's a distance vector routing protocol, which just means that it has sort of automatic failover built into the way it routes, rather than sort of static routes. So you wouldn't want to necessarily come in and do this with a legacy routing protocol. I think the other piece of it is that, in order for networks to be performant, you need to have an operator or organizer level.
That redundancy is key. I mean, definitely. So, and I get it, and even educating people on how this works, no, just because you're mad, you don't turn off everything so the kids can't watch TV or get on the games because you're a relay. People are connected to you, so you are turning them off. So having that redundancy built into the connectivity is key. So yeah.
Let's go into that just for a second, LaShawn, because, I've had kids that I've turned the internet off for. So, I'm sure you get calls like that all the time. And that kind of highlights this community communication, right? When you're building out your network and you're, speaking to your relays and you're speaking to the parents, what do you tell them, when they want to shut their child's internet off? Do you give them an alternative?
Well, not an alternative, because I mean, we're a growing network, right? So there is a grace there, and we haven't had it to happen often. It's like one time that it happens, we make enough noise about it where they're like, "Oh, that's right, they did say I can't turn it off because I'm a relay." So, and then they like the perks from being a relay because they see how it is affecting their personal bills every month, because it relays get the perks of being able to have money that goes towards their balance of a bill every month. And so it's just an educational part that we work through. And again, the redundancy in place has helped a lot when that failover system, may not be in place necessarily like we wanted. The redundancy definitely makes sure that everybody can stay on. So we don't have the problem a lot, but we do have it. It connects.
So one thing I wanted to add with that, it's kind of interesting as we've built over the last 4 years, is that a lot of these rural networks use these kind of relay systems. They don't not already, and so that is why building in the model and then also the revenue share really makes these relays not only just customers, they're also kind of part of that network. And so the whole idea and kind of is changing the system of that. And a lot of it is around also now you create a more resilient grid-like system, because a lot of those relays are going to have failover power. Whereas with the legacy type network, you have trunk comes in, right, and then you kind of branch out. But then if there's sort of any break, then you're kind of over. Whereas with the redundancy, if you have power go out in one part of the town, it's going to sort of reroute through that network. And we've seen that happen here in our rural Oregon networks that span 50 miles end to end, where you might have power out in one part of town, and then that still provides that connectivity through that kind of relay system is more grid-like. And I think what we're seeing now on the energy side of things is also being applied to the connectivity side of things, where we're thinking more about how do we create resilient grids in both energy and connectivity. So I thought that was, I think it's interesting. I think we'll see more of this kind of model evolve.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear Ben's perspective, because, you have this, kind of whatever works, we're going to throw spaghetti at the wall type of network building, right? So, and then there's this change moving towards saying you know what, from an economist perspective, this is actually going to work. So, what does it look like for you, shifting a little bit from the larger, more proven to the, bootstrap and whatever works type of funding? I look at the case study with the folks from the UK. You wouldn't initially think by looking at it surface level that that's going to work, but what they've done is so incredible. So it's hard to it's hard to deny that evidence.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's I think two things. First off, with redundancy, rolling blackouts are like a fact of life in most of the markets we cover. We've got a network that runs in Malawi that a third of the country's power got wiped out by a storm. So it's part of the design. It's part of the network design parameters. You just kind of accept it as this is the environment I'm in, this is going to happen. Let's get proactive about it. There's limits to solar, battery backup, et cetera, but you design that in and you do as much as you can. And then frankly, when there is a problem, you communicate, you're honest, right? I think what's so critical, we call it the jujitsu of small networks. Do what the incumbent doesn't do. Tell the truth. Look, this is what happened. And sometimes I think users, it might be on them. There's this stat 40% of problems in the United States are in-home issues. So it's your router configuration, et cetera. But if you can walk through that with someone and explain it to them, they'll kind of hopefully self-resolve that issue next time. I would say in terms of emerging markets. Sorry, Jessica, if you, that question again, sorry, I was.
Oh, so okay, let me back up a little bit. We were talking about emerging markets and also like just looking at it from a economist perspective, and I think Anoop was adding in the chat on the YouTube link that looking at redundancy synonymously with resiliency, right? Because this is the point that I was trying to make with folks that are resilient. They tend to do whatever it takes. Nothing will stop them, but at the same time, it gets exhausting to always have to be figuring things out on your own. And so I was noticing in the report that there was that that highlight that funding folks who are resilient has a better chance of succeeding. And so from Connectivity Capital's perspective, like, is that something that you're intentionally looking for now? Is somebody that's got a little bit of grit?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like ultimately that's what carries the day. And I think it's for us, the markets we cover, the model's a little bit different because we're entering networks when they're already at, say, 5,000 subscribers and trying to take them to 100,000 to hundreds of thousands. And it's, so the projects are a little bit different. But I think, one thing that I think is critical at every early stage community connectivity partner providers challenge is like, what is that user buy-in, right? Like part of the barn model that I think, I didn't mention, which I should have mentioned because it's so unique, is their first 3,000 users were their shareholders, were buyers into the co-op that then got a discount on the service for the first few years. So it was critical, that startup capital. It was a lot of sacrifice by the early founders, but then immediately they got the users to come around and say, we want this, we value this service. There was a dividend attached to it, et cetera. And that is kind of how it goes down the path. I think that's what's critical, is thinking about kind of the ability to pay and kind of the value that is being generated by the service. Because certainly if the ability to pay there, and this is why we focus on anchor customers, because the ability to pay tends to be higher with anchor institutions. And then that could cover some of those fixed costs of actually getting a network up and running.
I think I think you kind of stumbled also on the kind of our approach as well, is like building with the community, right? That buy-in, and that's what kind of creates that resiliency for that, even just in terms of capital, to work through expansion or network downturns or whatever that is, and creates a network that's going to not only be profitable in the beginning, but also have, grow and evolve. Jessica, do you mind if I just, as Ben said something that was really interesting that I wanted to touch on earlier, and he was talking about how 40% of the user issues in the US are on the device level, right? So something between the router and the human has gone wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
This is, we've really keyed into this since the beginning, and have really like part of what we have done actually and are continuing to do is build in managed routers that give the operator visibility into, where's that device? Are they out on the front porch and far away from the router? What's going on with that? Is that connecting and disconnecting? This is our focus also on LTE systems that are going to be direct to the device, because, when we interact, we actually can't really see it. There's my phone. We interact with the internet on our devices. That is how we experience it. So when our approach is at the end, the technology stack that we build is really, what is that user experience? What's that latency? And it's not always about, what the bandwidth is. What's going on with your buffer bloat? How is, how are, your UDP packets for a video call going, right? It's that experience in the device that we think is so key. And that's I think that's really important as these kinds of models evolve, that we think more and more about that, and we give tools to community operators to be able to solve that for their users. So thanks for the tangent.
No, I mean, I think that's wonderful, and it goes with this movement towards digital equity and digital inclusion. And if we go back to what LaShawn was talking about, the funding that she's been seeking through philanthropy has been for these projects that are to show, her community members. She'd been working with the elderly population to use devices, and that's the population that I feel like is a really big challenge. So I applaud for her for that. And I also, just when we're talking about philanthropy and nonprofits, that comes to the next question. So it sounds like a lot of bootstrapping a network is applying for grants, right? Like we all know there's grants, loans, there's investment, there's, cooperative where you pull from the community. And, Ben's mention of, what can you give me the term that you use so I can make sure I have it in the chat? When you combine the different funding mechanisms to
blended finance.
Yeah, there we go. Blended finance to have a larger social impact, right? So when it comes to that, is it best, like from the perspective of each of you, like, how do you decide? Am I going to do this as a cooperative? Am I going to do this as a 501c3 nonprofit? Am I going to be an LLC, or should I try and get the community to create a co-op? What is the leaning factor? Starting with Deb, I know all different types of ways.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the other two speakers' perspective on this too. I think that it isn't. I wouldn't think that it is necessary to do a 501c3. I think it comes back to the impact that you're trying to build for, and whether that funding is going to need to continue to be sustained through grant-based funding, or if there's a very clear pathway to profitability and sustainability and resilience in a more business-like format. Cooperatives are they're certainly not an easy way out. Member-owned cooperatives also though can help bootstrap a network. As Ben was mentioning earlier, we have a network in has using the Althea tech in Northern California that they bootstrap with $5,000 to start, and then people buy their own equipment and grow the network that way. So I guess kind of my take here is it's not necessary. Basically, your business plan or your understanding of how the network's going to sustain itself is probably going to determine your structure.
So I'll throw that over to LaShawn. Like when you were starting to want to become an internet service provider, did you think about that, whether you're going to do it with the community or if it was going to be a part of your business, just being an entrepreneur? Or can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it definitely started out just as the entrepreneur side of it. But as we got further into it and saw how limited we were with how far we could take it, we started looking into grants. So we don't have our own 501c3. We are for profit. Now, that's not to say we won't do that down the road, but fortunately enough, we did create relationships with nonprofits, and that has been really beneficial to us in making us attractive for the grants that we received. So I definitely encourage you to carve those relationships, especially if it's a community-based network that you're building. Then that's you touching roots with the community that you're in to help them make that impact, and everything else will fall into place. So we're LLC and working with nonprofits.
That's a really good point. And, a lot of nonprofit foundations can only fund organizations that are 501c3. But if you're working in conjunction with them on a project, you're providing the technical expertise to build out a network, for example, and they're doing another part of it. That's, where these grant fundings can help out a lot. And just like you said, it's all about creating those relationships. When you're just coming into this space, nothing about it is easy. We all happy and smiling right now, but there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that gets shed during the building of a network.
Yeah, I would just say I think it's going to change by each community. One thing that I think is critical that people understand is there's just clear trade-offs, and to use or to understand some of those trade-offs and like what's the best fit for your community. By and large, like for example, municipal networks, it's usually government funding. It's a much more kind of open process. There's kind of clear forums that are needed to go through to get to that place. So that path is a little clearer. By and large, our networks in emerging markets, all but a few have started out as private companies with clear social missions, and I think it's a founder question, right? Like, what drives you? Why are you doing this? And if you're driven by that social mission, there's structures with benefit corps, et cetera. There's just also the way you explain yourself to people, and making sure that that's front and center about those are the values that you care about. I do think though that as you there's a cost to grants. And I think everyone that's applied for a grant knows that, and everyone that hears about grant funding forgets about it, right? But it's it takes a lot of time, and we like to think about it as where are the users that you want to impact, right? And if the kind of ability to pay isn't going to be able to support the finances of the network, you're going to have to figure out how to make up that gap. That could be with philanthropy. We see a lot of networks all over the country that do their own form of blended finance. Cruise.io here in the Bay Area, they've got a great model where they partner with the community foundation and the school district to provide connectivity to low-income kids. But it's the same model. They find someone else to cover that. In the report, we tried to break down this idea of user versus payer, and sometimes that can be different. And being able to use those different sources of blended finance. But I will say, I think folks can get lost in the should we be this organization or the other? Ultimately, get people online. Nothing succeeds like success is one of the lines that our companies uses, and it sounds trite because it's repetitive, but it's true. People want to join something that's moving down the tracks. So as you connect more people will come along, and that philanthropic capital is typically there when they see that social mission being fulfilled.
I love that so much. Nothing succeeds like success. Go ahead, LaShawn.
Yeah. So, everything that was said about the long process of doing grants is true. But the one thing that I've learned very early on is you need to surround your people with the skills you personally do not have. And so we have someone on our team that focuses on finding the grants and helping us write the grants. And so that has been very, very beneficial to us. We have also looked at funding outside of, grants. And we have something on the table now that looks very promising for us. So I just want to encourage you, I'm not saying that Ben was saying count it out, but definitely surround yourself with the tools and the people resources that you need so that you can explore all the opportunities that are available for you to fund your effort.
I love that, LaShawn. That was awesome. Surround yourself with the skills that you do not have. And just kind of getting towards the end of this, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time left in our webinar, but we do have a ton more questions. I just kind of wanted to bring things back around a little bit, talk about what we're going to be sending out to everybody, a survey to follow up for the people that registered and for folks that we captured in the comments here. I think that this was really, really helpful for me, even, just getting to hear the full kind of 360 view of community connectivity. It's a totally different world now that we're living in, since 2020. And we're going to, have some pains. It's like your kids are growing, their pants all of a sudden are up to, past their ankles. And you're like, how did that happen? Type of growing pain. So for me, the big takeaways were, give each other grace. It's painful to grow sometimes so quickly, and surround yourself with the skills you don't have. Um, you know, Private companies with a really strong social mission, that to me spells resilient. In addition to redundancy, that's a huge thing. And just get people connected. So, I'll give each person a chance to, throw something out there that you want to close off with, or, how to get a hold of them. And then we'll follow up with folks. We'll send out a survey, ask, for any additional things that you would like to learn about, time to meet with us, and then also how to get a hold of each of us. And please, go to althea.net if you're wanting to join like the informational emails that go out. So I'll pass it over to LaShawn, and then Ben, and then end up with Deb.
Yeah, I just want to encourage those of you who are listening to this and you're thinking, I might be able to do it. I want to tell you to take the leap. Surround yourself with the people, the skills, the resources that will help you be successful. I cannot say how much of a value Althea has been to our company and given us the confidence that we can even expand beyond where we are, because they're right there in our back corner. They have the tools that are easy to use. The work not necessarily may be as easy, but the tools are easy to use, and it makes your process so much easier. And I just, for you guys who want to connect, I'm on Facebook with Wave 7 Communications. Our website is catchwave7.com. And I'd be open to, or I'm on LinkedIn, just reach out and we can have some candid conversations of how this really looks down in the trenches. And I know you can do it. So people need you to help them find solutions to their problems. So be the answer. Just be the answer.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, LaShawn. That's, I love the just like can do, because I think ultimately that is the initiating energy that creates the difference that I know you guys are out there doing, and so many other folks that are on this call. For us, one other model that we touched upon, but I think is also critical, is figuring out you can latch on to other institutions. There's a big history of the NRAN networks, which are part of universities. There's community centers. You don't have to go it alone. You don't have to go out there, sign a lease, and get an office, right? The big difference of a community, of a CCP, is cost avoidance. And the creativity that you get with that cost avoidance is partnering with other folks. And frankly, the people you partner with tend to be some of your earliest customers. Getting out there early, casting that net wide, making sure folks come in. The last thing I'll end with is just the 10 case studies that we highlighted. They're so diverse. They're from places all over the world, using different technologies, from fiber to fixed wireless. They kind of, they're kind of remarkable stories of human achievement in that they just got out there and did it. Certainly if anyone is looking at emerging market networks, that's our specialty. Come reach out to us. We love to be a resource. We've got an open source project, affordableBroadband.org. We like to joke about it. It's unlocking our share drive. So if we think we have something insightful that we're seeing on the ground, we usually put together a deck. We've got some stuff on sales and marketing, just all of the nuts and bolts of how to operate a network. Some challenges are big and some of them are basic. So that's where we kind of throw up the material that we think when we have something thoughtful to say. So with that, thank you all for joining. Feel free to reach out, and we'd love to be a resource if you need help.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I feel so honored to be part of this amazing group of folks that are, getting it done and getting folks connected and building amazing things. And everyone that joined in the audience today as well. Your questions were amazing. And I want to just end by saying I do think we are in a unique time and place in history to build not only broadband access, but to build better systems. I think it was Frank Lloyd Wright, that sort of the famous architect, that talked about, the houses that we build like shape who we are. And I think that's the same with systems too. So when we build these networks in ways that are built with the community, we are then in turn shaping our community. There are unprecedented resources for building connectivity networks right now, and there's a mandate worldwide. So I think, now is the time, and all the folks here are here to, support this kind of effort. You can certainly feel free to reach out to us, or if you're still trying to gather information and understand the different processes here, we have Discord and Twitter groups. We have docs at althea.net. And then, of course, please feel free to reach out to us on our website. There's a form you can fill out, and we can start looking at what is your vision and supporting that as well. So now is the time, and as Sean says, you can do it. So thanks again, everybody, for being part of this webinar.
Yeah, thank you all, and thanks for the panel. I really appreciate you jumping onto this project really quickly, and there was a huge response. Looking forward to the next one. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see you all again.